Yeah.
we understand that assigning certain attributes to everyone of a particular race is racist. Well, we haven't quite got there with ableism yet.
It's beautiful how, these big mainstream technology companies are trying to mainstream accessibility and include that in their devices.
When our careers and our education and our entertainment depend on people's assumptions, that's a
Yeah.
very dangerous position for us to be.
Today's guest is Jonathan Mosen, a globally recognized advocate, broadcaster, as well as leader in the blind and disability community. Blind since birth, Jonathan has spent decades advancing accessibility with companies like Freedom Scientific and IRA, as well as through policy and leadership, serving at both global and national level positions with organizations like Royal New Zealand Foundation for the Blind, World Blind Union, as well as National Federation of the Blind today. After hosting the highly acclaimed podcast Living Blindfully and founding Mushroom FM, he's currently hosting the podcast Access On by National Federation of the Blind, which you can find on multiple podcast streams. While we faced some technical limitations while recording this particular episode, it basically we did not edit that or re-record because we want to bring to you the raw fact, the very crucial fact that technology is still not fully accessible to all. This conversation is especially if you are a disabled person, an ally, a caregiver, or somebody who's just generally curious and seeking real life examples of what all is possible even with sight loss. This is proof that blindness doesn't limit success. Jonathan's story is a testament to what is achievable when you stop looking at blindness as a barrier and instead start exploring potential and opportunities once you further start leaning into that part of your identity. On that note, let's welcome Jonathan Mosen. Thank you, first of all, for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
Jonathan, you are an absolute legend in the whole visually impaired community. You've done everything from advocacy to activism and working with private companies, working beside governments to make policy alterations. You have done so much in broadcasting. I can't think of one kind of role that you haven't yet performed. So it's an absolute honor to be having this conversation with you and having the pleasure to interview you and dive deeper. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. The honor's mine. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Can you share a bit about your childhood, where you grew up, how it was, and how did your family and the general community support you as a blind kid?
Sure, I was born blind in New Zealand and grew up with my parents and four other siblings. My oldest sibling is blind, so that did help some. My parents had some experience of blindness before.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from a pretty loving family. There were always grandparents and aunts and uncles around because my parents both have very large families themselves. So it was
Uh-huh.
a busy time. And I think I was just pretty much treated like any other child. I was expected to do everything that the other kids did.
Yeah.
And, eventually went to a school for the blind because that was pretty much the default back then, but was
Mhm.
ultimately mainstreamed later in my education and was mainstreamed all through intermediate and high school and then on to university.
Wow. Did you have any mentors or role models along the way, which kind of by the sounds of it, one would be your older brother, but along with him, anybody else you'd like to mention who kind of gave you that perspective that life is you can do anything and life is pretty much like any other kids have on your life?
Yes, I think that mentoring for blind children is really important and actually also for blind parents. When my parents had my brother, who's 15 years older than me, they met a blind social worker who was getting around on buses and just getting on with life, had a
Yeah.
family. And I think that really demonstrated to them that
Mm-hmm.
a good life as a blind person was possible. And I think blind kids need that too, to be able to see blind adults just doing everyday things. And perhaps they might meet somebody who is involved in a career that they would like
Yeah.
to pursue. So having that mentoring is important. And I was fortunate going to the school for the blind and also
Mhm.
having an older brother who had those connections with the blind community. I did meet quite a few adults who had a transformative impact on my life and really made me want to strive to go to university to achieve all that I could do. And I may have taken a different path had it not been for those blind mentors.
Wow. I do hope like everybody, every kid, even every adult, like since 85% of us lose vision like later in life. Even for example, I started losing vision at 19, and for since then till this point, until very recently, like until a few years ago, I did not know a single blind person in my life. And I was still it was I was basically winging it, as you would say. I wasn't sure what to look forward to, and I was just getting through life one step at a time, and not trying to reach my maximum potential. Um, and when I did, I wasn't sure if it's even possible because I had no role models to kind of give me that perspective that it is definitely possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. Like I think everybody who starts losing vision or acquires any kind of disability at any point in life, they should reach out to their larger community and maybe reach out to some role models who could let them know that, everything is still possible.
Yeah, and
Along.
while we're on this, the
Mhm,
National Association of Parents of Blind Children here in the United States, which is
mhm,
a division of the National Federation of the Blind, does an
mhm,
amazing job here because I think what happens is that, as I say, when blindness comes to a family, maybe those parents have never really encountered a blind person before and they don't know what's possible. And what I love, I'm just going to stop Jaws from talking because I know you can hear that. So let me just,
yeah.
there we go. Um, and what we have with the Parents Division at the NFB is this wonderful opportunity where parents come to the NFB convention every July and they
Mm,
meet with blind adults. And those blind children also come to the convention and they meet the blind adults. So it's
yeah.
this wonderful passing on of knowledge and positivity and realism from generation to generation. And it's
Yeah.
just wonderfully transformative when you see those parents realizing, wow, blindness isn't actually the tragedy that I thought it was. And as long as my child has the opportunity and the training to succeed, they really can have a good life. They won't be dependent on me for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and that is so essential because you are trying like the person who's blind themselves is trying to get through life. They don't know what to expect. The parents are definitely, as much as they want to help, they really don't know what to like where to direct those kids and what to really expect and what they can expect. I 100% agree with you. I've been to one of those conventions, and wow, what an experience to have
Yeah.
so many blind people and allies in like one space. We basically took over the entire hotel. This was last year,
Yes. Yeah. And
in
it's kind of
Orlando.
cool. We're blind people in the majority for 1 week, you
I
know?
know. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. What an experience. I believe it's in New Orleans this year.
Yes, New Orleans this year, and I've been to a convention of the NFB in New Orleans before, and it was amazing. So I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to getting back there.
Awesome. Okay, so looking back to all these years, what are some of the or even the best one positive experience that blindness has brought to you, and how that might have like changed your perspective or impacted your life? Because I know we talk a lot about like, what did we lose and what are the things we are not able to do and how to do them. But I really want to bring out the idea that it's not all that bad. There are actually some good things that come out of it. And what could be those some good things for you?
And there aren't many things that I've wanted to do in life that I haven't been able to do. Obviously, drive a car is the biggest one that comes to mind, and we're getting very close now with self-driving vehicles, where
Yeah.
even that won't be an issue. Um, I've been fortunate to have a career in radio, a career in information technology. I've been a chief executive, and the most important thing in my life is that I've been a dad. I am a dad to four wonderful adult children, and I now have a grandchild as well. And so, I've led a full life, and being blind can be a pain sometimes, but then so can being short, or
Yeah.
any number of characteristics can be an inconvenience at times. But
Yeah.
largely, if I think the biggest barrier we face is attitudinal.
Mhm.
Attitudes towards blindness has a huge impact on the opportunities that we have. But no, I honestly feel like I've had a full life as a blind person. And at the age I'm at now, I'm in my 50s. If I were offered sight now, I would not take that because this is my normality. And I would be bombarded with a lot of information that's visual in nature that I wouldn't know how to process. I'd probably
Yeah.
have to go into extensive rehabilitation to know what all this visual data meant. I don't have the time. I'm too busy.
I think that's a positive right there. I often feel that I absolutely love that I'm not constantly distracted by all the visuals and things around me. And I actually prefer being able to focus on things that I want to focus on. And I can do in my head or with my ears instead of those visual distractions that most of us are quite distracted with all the time. So I agree, that's a
Yeah.
definite positive. But on that note, a lot of times people in the community who are new to the BVI community or even allies or just regular sighted people, a lot of us look at the BVI community as a monolith. Okay, so blind people do X thing, blind people do Y thing, and they would generalize it a lot, and being a part of the community for over a decade, I realized that's obviously not true. We are like any other human beings who are very different from each other, who could be, I mean, sure, we have blindness or low vision in common, but it's not necessary that just because we have that in common, we'll have other things in common as well. So it's not really a monolith. That's something I mean, if you really just pay attention to it or even think about it, you'll know that. But a lot of people seem to not know that. They look at the whole community as a monolith. In your experience, 50 years, as you said, over 50 years of experience as a blind person and being so extremely active in the entire community in so many different kind of roles, can you share some experiences or examples of where preferences or behaviors really differ within the community, and it's not really a monolith, it's not like one size fits all?
No, I mean, most of us understand now what racism is, and
Yeah.
we understand that assigning certain attributes to everyone of a particular race is racist. And we know
Yeah.
that. Well, we haven't quite got there with ableism yet. And obviously, there are interesting misconceptions out there like all blind people must have amazing hearing, all blind people must be brilliant at music because Stevie Wonder is and Ray Charles was, and on it goes. But the NFB used to run a series of ads that Dr. Jernigan put together a long time ago. And he talked about this, that we're people just like you, and there are geniuses and jerks among us, and there are all sorts of people doing all sorts of things. And there is a rich tapestry. I do wonder, though, whether there is a blind culture to some degree that
Mhm.
certainly the connected blind community is a part of. I
Mhm.
think that may be the case, but no, but that doesn't really negate your question either, because just as there are certain cultures that races enjoy and share, it doesn't mean that everybody is somehow the same, and
Yeah.
it is frustrating where somebody might say to someone, "Well, this blind person that I knew didn't have trouble doing this, so
Yeah.
why do you have trouble doing this? Like all blind people should be the same." And we are very diverse. I mean, some of us are better travelers than others. Some of us are better with technology than others. We're all
Yeah.
going to have attributes that are strengths and attributes that are weaknesses.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing your views on that. All right, so from within the community, I know you've been like a leader in all these spaces, so there's a good chance you have not experienced this a lot like the rest of us layman people. But have you ever experienced like judgment or unfair expectations from within the community when they look up to you as a representative of the entire community, which,
I
yeah.
Yeah, look, I think so in a number of respects. One is that I also have a hearing impairment, so I wear hearing aids, and sometimes people don't appreciate the impact that that can have on a blind person's ability to travel because echolocation is more difficult, for example. It can
Mm.
be harder to get spatial awareness if you're at a bank of
Yeah.
elevators and it goes ping. It can be harder to tell where the ping has come from, a whole bunch of things
Yeah.
like that. I mean, and I suppose the other thing that I probably shouldn't complain about too much, but um, I I never really sought to have the international profile that I do. I've just got on with my life and done my best to help people. And I've been fortunate to be in various jobs where I've been able to do that. But for whatever reason, I have developed this profile, and it kind of feels sometimes like um, uh, I don't know, like you're constantly on display, and that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing. It's not a phenomenon I ever expected.
Proud of.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's got to, that's why I asked, like, it's got to be a lot of pressure to be the person that you are. I personally know so many blind people who, young people who look up to you, like Chris Nussbaum. When I was talking to him, he mentioned you like 3 times because of your broadcasting career. And I know so many people who you've really changed lives of, they look up to you, and that's got to be a lot of pressure. So I just, I was
Yeah, it,
curious.
it it's very kind, but it is to some degree a lot of pressure as well
Yeah.
because we're all just humans. So that's odd. That's something I never expected to happen, but um, it comes with its privileges. I mean, I've been really fortunate to have been able to do some of the roles that I've done. And this one here at the NFB is the pinnacle for me. It's an amazing role to be in. So I'm not really complaining. It's more of an observation, I think, than anything else.
In all of this very successful journey, you must have had your ups and downs. But talking of the ups, what is like that one key accomplishment? It doesn't have to be like big for the world, but just for you, like what really meant a lot to you. One thing that you're really proud of.
I mean, being a dad at a personal level is the proudest achievement for me. But if I was going a bit beyond that, it
Hmm.
would be the Copyright Act in New Zealand that we got
Yeah.
passed in 1994. I'm not singularly responsible for that, but I did get it over the line there. We had this idea in New Zealand that access to information was no different from access to buildings. And in those days, it was well understood about the importance of wheelchair ramps and curb cuts and making sure that physical environments were accessible. But
Hmm.
in those days, if you wanted to produce a book in Braille or on Talking Book, you would have to go to the author and
Okay.
or the copyright holder and ask for their permission to make
Hmm.
that work available in Braille or Talking Book. And some of the copyright holders would actually say no. And that
Yeah.
would mean that a blind person was deprived of the right to read that book. And I do believe fundamentally that
Hmm.
reading is a human right. It's why I'm
Yeah.
passionate about Braille instruction, why I'm passionate about this issue. So we
Yeah.
got a bill passed into law in New Zealand, which
Hmm.
basically said any organization that serves blind people or people with a print disability of any other kind who've been properly verified and registered can, without seeking the permission of the copyright holder, make a book available on Talking Book or in Braille. Later, I came to an NFB convention and talked to the NFB here about how we did that, and they emulated that law here in the USA. And
Wow.
ultimately, we got the Marrakesh Treaty, which is an international treaty under the World Intellectual Property Organization,
Yeah.
that enshrined this concept in international law and facilitated the freer exchange of material internationally. So that all started with a piece of legislation in New Zealand over 30 years ago, and that's what I'm very proud of.
Wow, that is so huge. To have like a global impact. With one thought and one mission and single-mindedness. That's crazy. But on the flip side, what is that one project or role or something that you're not fully satisfied with? Either it did not turn out the way you wanted it to, or you wish it could have done more.
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't often do regrets, so I have to think about that. I I think if there's one, it's that I ran a voluntary internet radio station. I still do, actually. I ran a voluntary internet radio station. And towards the end of 2013, we got a group of people that were being quite disruptive. And
Okay.
at the time, there was quite a lot of change going on in my life. And I decided that I just didn't have the energy and the stamina to
Yeah.
persist with that voluntary project at that time.
Mm.
And we closed that station down temporarily. It came back about a year and a half later. I
Mhm.
regret doing that because I feel like I was bullied out of doing something that I love,
Yeah.
and it taught me that sometimes you just have to stand your ground sometimes and ride the storm. And make some tough decisions that we could have dispensed with the troublemakers rather than close the thing down.
Yeah. But the fact that you came back up like a year or so later, it shows your grit that you didn't, after all, give
Yeah,
up on that at all. That's awesome.
yeah. Yeah, and I
Okay.
mean, I had time to reflect, and I reflected on how much that radio station meant to people,
Mhm.
the value that we added, the
Yeah.
entertainment we provided, and it's been running successfully, continuously for nearly 10 more years since then. So I'm really glad that we got it back.
Wow. I'll be adding links to all of those things in the bio. So,
Okay,
to make sure that anybody who's listening to this, and I know a lot of people will, can go and check that out in case they haven't
sure.
already. Okay, so this next one is optional. You can choose to not comment.
Ooh.
Um, so, do President Trump's views on DEI and accessibility impact your work and mission in any way, personally or like at the larger community level? Do you think it impacts anything?
It's too early to say right now. So we are looking at the executive orders on this issue at the moment, and it feels like there may be some possible threat to accessibility. But the good news is that accessibility is pretty enshrined in legislation in this country. I mean, obviously,
Hmm.
we've got the Americans with Disabilities Act. We also have Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act,
Right.
and on it goes. That does, of course, legislation can always be repealed, but that would be incredibly difficult to do that.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, there are many governmental employees who are blind who are unsettled, understandably
Mhm.
so. It is an unsettling time, and our job is just to make sure that the rights that we have fought so hard for over the years are
Yeah.
protected, and we intend to do that. That's not necessarily my wheelhouse here because we have a really great advocacy team working on
Yeah.
those issues and analysing the executive orders as we speak.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing your views on that because everybody else I've posed the question to has chosen to not comment at all. So I just appreciate you sharing anything.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so let's shift gears a little. I know you are big on technology, so I have like a few questions around that specifically. So what are some of the technologies or aids that you use for your daily life that um, and how they have evolved over the years, like when you started off and how they are today? What do you think that
So
journey has looked like?
I mean, I'm sitting here in high tech heaven right now at the NFB because I look after the International Braille and Technology Center, and we've got about 2 million US dollars worth of equipment here, and
Wow.
it's amazing. I mean, it's like a geek's paradise. But in terms of what I've historically been using, I do use Windows most of the time, and I'm a JAWS user. I did work with Freedom Scientific for a long time. Gosh, what was it?
Yeah.
About 12 or 13 years. I'm a JAWS user, and I helped to influence some of the features in JAWS. I also
Mhm.
have an iPhone, which I really enjoy using. I have a Mantis Braille display, and I like that one a lot because it has a QWERTY keyboard.
Ah,
On my desk at the moment, I have a Monarch, which
ah,
is the new multi-line braille display that produces graphics and text, and
ah.
that's really interesting to play with and just see how it integrates into my life.
Yeah.
But those are the key technologies. I'm using the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses more and more.
Hmm.
But in terms of hardware, that's what I'm doing. And obviously, I'm using software tools like
Yeah.
IRA in particular, which
Mhm.
I also used to work for IRA,
Yeah.
and various other software packages that improve my life and efficiency.
So, what do you use? So these are a lot of communication tools, right? And I noticed that anytime I ask this question, we primarily talk about communication tools. In terms
Mm.
of mobility, what are the aids or what are the systems that you've adopted over the years to kind of get from point A to point B, especially if it's a new place, because that is something I personally struggle with.
Right.
If I know that okay, there's this new art museum in my town and I've never been there before in that area, and now I have to get there, that holds a lot of friction points for me. So that's a question I ask everybody I meet, to be honest. How do you manage situations like that?
I'm a white cane user, so I use that. I also, if I'm going somewhere new that I haven't been to before, these days I probably just use Uber or Lyft to get there and type the name of the business I want to go to and call Uber or Lyft. I guess I'm fortunate that I can afford to do that, and not everybody can.
Yeah.
These days, with my hearing impairment, I choose not to do too much with public transit like buses and trains. And that's not because a
Mhm.
hearing impaired person can't, I guess, because many do, but it's just something I don't have to do. And I don't kind of feel the need to put myself through unnecessary stress when at the moment I can afford to jump in an Uber or Lyft and go straight there.
Yeah.
I do use tools like Blind Square and sometimes Soundscape
Mhm.
and mainstream tools like Google Maps and Apple Maps to get walking
Right.
directions somewhere, and that works pretty well as well. So those are the primary travel tools that I use. When I do a lot of flying, and
Yeah.
when I'm flying, I use a software package called TripIt, and
Okay.
it's cool. You put your you forward your itineraries
Uh-huh.
to a TripIt email address, and it builds an itinerary for you,
Okay.
and then all in the one app. You have your travel, your airfares, your hotel, and it all puts it in the one place. But if you get the pro version of it, it will tell you things like what gate you're leaving from, what baggage
Ah,
carousel your baggage is at.
wow.
It'll tell you when a flight has changed and when you might be able to get a cheaper flight or an earlier flight. And I just find it cool. And it has Siri integration, so I can ask it, what's my next gate? And it will just tell me you need to be at gate C4 or whatever. And I know that's where I need
Wow.
to be next.
Interesting. I did not, I wasn't aware of that particular app. I will definitely try that out.
Mm,
Um, Especially because I'm traveling next week. So I
yeah,
think that's a great time to try something like that out. Thank you for sharing that.
no
So
problem.
you use all of these different aids and technology, which also I know a lot of blind, visually impaired people who are not comfortable with
Mm.
technology. So when you started off, has it always been integrated into your life like seamlessly, or did you like consciously make a decision at some point? And if you did, what were those initial years like? Were there any challenges? If yes, how did you navigate those?
I think I was really lucky for a couple of reasons. One is that I started high school just at the time when computers were becoming really interesting. We
Mm-hmm.
had, and this was in the mid 80s, so we had an old piece of technology called the VersaBraille, which was made by a company called Telesensory Systems Incorporated. And
Okay.
that VersaBraille used to store Braille documents on a standard cassette.
Mm.
And you put the cassette in, and you'd kind of go to the chapter you wanted, and this braille display thing would shudder and shake and clunk, and eventually you would get your document. And we had that connected to an Apple IIe, and we had a thing
Wow.
called a Cranmer modified embosser, which made a heck of a noise whenever you tried to print something out. But for some reason, I just sort of naturally took to this stuff to the point that I was really helping the teachers at the resource room
Wow.
at the school for the blind that I was at the high school I was attending, to use this technology. And so I cut a deal with them that probably cost me dearly, which
Yeah.
was that I would help them to get to grips with the technology and show them what it could do if they pulled me out of PE period so I could do that. So I never did PE at high school at all because I would just get pulled out so that I could teach them how to use the computer. And I would teach other kids how to use the computer as well. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I don't. It's not clear to me why I had that aptitude for it, but I always have had that ability to learn
Yeah.
something and then pass it on to somebody else.
It's amazing. And you've also been able to incorporate a lot of that in your own life. So, which, somebody, um, some other person, a lot of other people would find like really intimidating. And they'd be like, oh my God, this is too much chaos. But I love the fact that you are so open to technology and, you're so into it, like so much that you're ready to teach others about it. So, but how do you keep updated on the latest innovations and technologies, assistive tech, accessibility? I've heard a lot of your podcast, and so much of it is around technology, and you bring in these fabulous people from Microsoft and whatnot. How do you kind of keep up with all of that is happening in the tech world today in terms of accessibility and assistive?
I read a lot. I read a lot of tech news, and I use a tool called RSS feeds, which maybe aren't as popular as they used to be, but
Hmm.
you can usually find on a blog or a website an RSS feed, which you can plug into a piece of software called a feed reader. And the advantage of that is that you can organize it so that all your news comes to the one place. And in my feed reader, I have folders for technology news, for political news, news back from New Zealand, where
Yeah.
I'm originally from, various things like that. But it means that I can very quickly skim a
Mhm.
massive amount of tech news without having to go to different websites. And that really helps me to keep up.
Ah, sweet. So in terms of since you're so aware about technologies, I always have this question in my head, like, what is the better path ahead? Is it to make the mainstream technology more and more accessible, or is it to build specific devices, which are called assistive technology for blind people? I know they are both important, but in your view, what is the future and what should be the future?
The landscape has definitely changed, and we've got the National Federation of the Blind to thank in no small part for that change. So, even 20 years ago or so, there was a handful of companies that we would have to engage with to make sure that blind people had the technology that they needed. And a lot of those companies were specialist companies like Freedom Scientific or Humanware or those guys.
Right.
And but our advocacy has been so effective that we've actually caused these really big tech players to come to the table
Yeah.
and make their products accessible. There, you can walk up to pretty much any computer in the world now and make it talk relatively
Yeah.
easily because there's a screen reader built in. Yeah, that wasn't always the case until quite recently. So the challenge we now have is that we have a much greater number of players to interact with, and we've got
Mm.
to avoid the danger that well-meaning, very well-intentioned people don't assume that they know what's best for blind people, because when our careers and our education and our entertainment depend on people's assumptions, that's a
Yeah.
very dangerous position for us to be. So one of the things I'm spending a lot of time on here at the National Federation of the Blind is
Hmm.
strengthening those relationships with big tech and other players who maybe have some good ideas about a
Yeah.
new technology that a blind person might benefit from, working with them and saying, just make sure that blind people are involved at the key conceptual stages of what you're thinking about, so that we
Right.
don't waste precious time. You don't produce a product that doesn't hit the mark because you've made assumptions. You have
Yeah.
to involve everyday blind people at every stage of the process.
Yeah. That's so important because I am trying to do something like that with my team, and from day one, like we are talking to we've spoken to so many people, and I always feel like it's not enough. Whenever
Mm.
we are thinking that, okay, here we've reached a certain success point, I'm like, wait, that's not enough. We've got to take this a to like a bunch of other blind people before we decide like where are we going with this. Awesome. On that note, when you mentioned that now we can go up to any store and just check out a laptop with a screen reader, I actually do that. That's something interesting I do. So my husband, Harshit, he's a big tech geek, and he's all about electronics. So whenever we are even at Costco, he will go to the electronic section first. And what I end up doing is I go to every laptop and I turn on voiceover and I'm checking out the laptop. And a couple of times I've actually forgotten to turn it off, and I wonder, how the staff will handle it if they will be like
Yeah.
totally flabbergasted, like, what is happening with my laptop? It's been interesting. I do agree with you that it's beautiful how these big mainstream technology companies are trying to mainstream accessibility and include that in their devices. Okay, so I have like two uh, final questions for this particular area. If you had to motivate young technologists or big brands or investors in terms of like to motivate them to invest their time and resources into accessibility and assistive technology, what are some of the things you might say to them?
I would say that there's a great quote from the very first president of the National Federation of the Blind, a brilliant, brilliant legal scholar by the name of Jacobus Timbrook, who founded this organization. And one of the things he loved to say was, or my road to hell is paved with your good intentions. And it's a great line, because so
Wow.
often there are really well-meaning people who think they've come up with the next big thing, and this thing that is just going to radically transform a blind person's life. But they haven't actually asked a blind person what they think of it, or maybe they've asked, one blind person they
Yeah.
know, or something like that. So, what I would say is involve real blind people at the earliest possible stage. And here at the NFB, we offer a program in this regard called Build: Blind Users
Mhm.
Innovating Leading Design.
Hmm.
And we can assemble for any organization or any entrepreneur a series of testers
Mhm.
with whatever profile that you need. So if you need some super geeks to talk UX and UI and
Yeah.
all those important things, and talk about software development, we can do that. If you need real world sort of end users who need to beat up on this technology and break it for you, we can do that
Yeah.
as well. But it's really important. The old, somewhat overused cliche in the disability sector about nothing about us without us, is
Yeah.
actually true. We need
I
to be
agree.
involved as early in the process as possible, because that's the culturally appropriate thing to do.
Yeah. I wasn't I'd heard of the Builds program, but I wasn't like super aware of what it exactly does, and it
Mm.
sounds extremely aligned with what I'm trying to do. And I think to maybe we after this interview we can talk about how we can collaborate through Builds. I think I would love that. Does that sound
Sure.
okay?
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. Would love that.
Awesome. Okay, last question about technology. This is the crazy one. If you could design the perfect piece of assistive technology, anything at the tip of your magic wand, what problem would it solve?
I'd like to, yeah, I mean, it's hard to go past the self-driving car thing, but we're getting there, I hope. Being able to transport yourself efficiently from point A to point B without relying on somebody else would be pretty wonderful. But I think I've been thinking a lot in recent times about what the future of screen reading looks like in an era of AI. And at the moment, screen readers are quite linear. And I would like to see one of the screen reader companies develop a conversational interface to screen reading, much like if I have a sighted assistant sitting beside me and I ask them a question like, what do you see this on the screen or whatever, or you describe this to me. It's more like having a conversation with a sighted person. I don't think that would replace screen reading as we know it, but it
Yeah,
would be a very valuable enhancement in certain situations.
it's amazing. If I'm not wrong, we do have some chat bots in some websites. Have you ever had a chance to try those? Do you think those kind of work in the same way?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we are getting there, and there are people who are starting to play in this space. And I think screen reading could be quite disrupted in the next few years, particularly as AI kind of gets some of the kinks ironed out, and we see fewer hallucinations, and it becomes more powerful.
Amazing. Okay, so I have two closing questions at this point. One, a piece of message or an advice for someone who just learned that they'd be living with vision impairment or blindness for the rest of their life, or it could also be for their family and friends and support system.
That my advice would be kind to yourself. It's obviously a huge adjustment. Sight is a very dominant sense. And so if you have it, it's natural that you're going to depend on it. It's absolutely natural to do that.
Mhm.
And it can be mysterious and frightening when you contemplate how you would do the things that you do without sight, but it is possible. And my biggest advice would be to get in touch with the National Federation of the Blind in some way. I've only been working here as a leader of on the team for a short time, but
Yeah,
the NFB has had an influence on my life since the 1980s. And when I was a teenager,
yeah,
I kind of faced some pretty big existential questions because I worked out for myself that the biggest problem I had wasn't being blind. It was other people's perceptions of my blindness and how they were determined that I wasn't going to amount to anything because I was
yeah.
a blind person. And as a kind of a pretty sensitive teenager, that really got me down. And I was very fortunate that I got online in the mid 80s and I discovered the NFB at a time when it probably saved my life because I was really down about what my life would be like if no one would believe in me as a blind person. And
Yeah.
the NFB's literature turned my life around. And so I strongly encourage anybody to realize that actually, if you get the right training, if you get the right opportunity, you can live the life you want. It is absolutely possible.
I 100% agree. NFP is like uh, at least for everything I can think of at this point, or I have the situations I've been in my life. I feel like NFP is like that one stop shop
Mm.
where you can go for, or you can talk to someone. It can be just emotional support, it can be technology, it can be so many different things, just the larger community. It is that one place where you can at least start looking for answers if you are ever demotivated or lost in your
Yeah.
journey as a blind person. Okay, so final question, and this is a fun one. If you could have a conversation with anybody in the world, it could be someone from the past, someone in the present, or future, if you can see that far, who would it be, and what would that conversation be about?
I'd have a conversation with John Lennon and
Ah,
I'd ask him, why did he go back to Yoko
ah,
when after his lost weekend? Because I think if he hadn't done that, I think we would have had more Beatles music. I think
Oh,
he had a girlfriend by the name of May Pang for a while
yeah.
during that Lost Weekend era, and John and Paul were actually getting closer, and I think if John and May had stayed together, there would be more Beatles music, and of course, you know, John wouldn't have ended up back at the Dakota, and who knows? But I mean, it would just be. I've always admired John's wacky sense of humor, and I think it'd be just fun to have a chat to him.
Awesome. I hope, I don't know actually. Maybe there'll be a time machine in future and we can actually make that happen. Who knows? Technology is going pretty fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
With that,
there's a great book. There's a great book
yeah.
called Saving John Lennon, and I can't
Uh,
remember who wrote it now.
uh-huh.
But it's on Apple Books. I read it there. It's about a
Okay.
guy who goes back in a time machine and tries to save John Lennon and the consequences of all of that.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm gonna recommend that to a friend who also loves Beatles, which I know you also
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
I will definitely recommend that. I said that was the last question, but one just popped up. Since you're a big reader, can you suggest one book for everybody to read in association with the BVI community?
Um, if I were to recommend one book, it would be it would be A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Hmm.
And the reason why I recommend that book is that I think it's a challenge for us to advocate for what we need and be strident about it when we need to without getting angry with the world. And I do see a lot of people for whom all of this advocacy and stuff, it can make them angry and a bit bitter and grumpy
Yeah.
about the world. And I came across Eckhart Tolle's work at a really difficult phase of my life when
Hmm.
I had a marriage that split up and I was missing my children. I was on the other side of the world, and somebody just sat down next to me and said, "You need to read this book." It was The Power of Now, actually, but A New Earth is a slightly newer book, and I think it's important because we have to look after ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves. It isn't easy always when it feels like we have to battle for the most basic of human rights, and that can get you
Yeah.
down. So I think it's important to be healthy while we do this, to be mentally healthy while we do this, and that's why I would recommend that book.
Thank you. That reminds me, you're also into meditation, which I also try, doing at least 3 to 5 times a week, and it does really help. I just wanted to resonate with that. With that, let's close. And thank you, Jonathan, for having this chat with me. Absolutely loved it. I learned so much more, and I do hope to stay connected because I want to dive deeper into a lot of those resources you mentioned. I would love to kind of make use of that in my own life. So thank you.
Awesome. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.